Excited today that we're co-hosting this webinar with SAP. So today we're going to be talking about the future of SAP EWM. Just a couple of notes. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on various channels after this session, YouTube, etc. So everyone will have access to the recording. And if anybody's got any questions as we go through this, then please pop them in the chat because we'll have plenty of time at the end to answer any questions. Next slide, please, Stephen. Perfect. So today, who have we got on the call? So we're joined today by Florian, who's the head of product management for EWM. It's great to have you on the call, Florian. We've got Stephen from the config team, who has extensive experience in delivering EWM solutions to customers and is our product owner for our pre-built mobility product. We've got Leanne, who is our EWM practice lead and also has extensive experience in delivering EWM projects. And we've got myself, Jeff Gray, who's the product manager for the config team responsible for our different products, including pre-built, console, and coding control. So what we're going to be talking about today, so Florian is going to give us an EWM update, talk about the current release and the future roadmap. Stephen is going to then talk about how the config team are optimizing EWM with our mobility product pre-built, and is then going to talk about some of the innovations that we've been working on over the last couple of months. And then finally, we're going to have a Q&A session. So please, any questions at all, as I mentioned before, pop them into the chat and we'll pick them up at the end of this session. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Florian to take us through the EWM roadmap. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jeff. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm always proud to talk about our latest innovations. I think we have quite a bunch of it. In matter of time, I try to keep it short, but would like to highlight you certain things we developed in 2022 and even in Feature Pack 1, which we basically released at the 22nd of February. So it's kind of brand new, what you will see partially on the next couple of slides. So if we go to the latest innovations on the next slide, I would like to take some highlights here. I mean, as mentioned, only for the 2022 release, we have a What's New block where there's a PowerPoint attached to that with like roughly 150 slides. So you could imagine I could talk for ages now. But I would like to pull out certain topics, which I personally, and I think from a lot of customer feedback and partner feedback, I think is really a huge step forward. First thing I would like to start with is the advanced shipping and receiving. So if you know that, this is basically our new integration, a kind of a strategic way forward, which we are aiming for between the integration of EWM and transportation management. And we started that already back in the release 2020 Feature Pack 1, which was a co-innovation project with one of the big automotive companies you might know. And there we started with the so-called execution-driven way. So what does execution-driven way mean? So we basically get the outbound delivery orders. We start picking, packing, staging, and then we know, okay, this is the number of pallets, this is the shape of the pallets. Let's communicate back to transportation management what we have there. And then you can, with the concrete data, start your planning exercise and order trucks accordingly. They show up, you load them and send them away. But then for sure, many customers said like, yeah, but that is a little bit on too short notice for us. We need to plan ahead. Yeah, so we need to basically plan before we start our execution in the warehouse. And then with 2022 release, so let's say with the release last October, we shipped the so-called sales order based pre-planning scenario. So because we think this is our best practice, that you take the sales order, you hand them over to the transportation management system, then you do your planning, because then you can create the deliveries according to your planning and hand them via that over to EWM, start the picking, packing, staging, and still you will get an update on the concrete dates. I mean, there's always smaller deviations maybe, so that you have the detailed information about the pallet numbers and everything available in TM as well, so that when the truck shows up, that you can do a kind of controlled loading, for example, as well afterwards. And then again, the customers came across and said like, yeah, that's nice that you believe the sales order based pre-planning scenario is the best practice. But you know, we are a long time SAP customer. and we spent ages in optimizing our delivery creation, tailor them, slice and dice our deliveries, consolidate and do it vice versa. So we would like to stick to that process and would do the planning based on the delivery. And that is what we've shipped with the feature pack 1 now. Basically, as mentioned, the 22nd of February it is available now. And now you can, what we did is we introduced a new status. So your deliveries are still created. They are handed over to both systems, to EWM and TM. And in EWM, they get a status like blocked for further processing because the planning needs to be done ahead. And then the planning takes place. You set it ready for warehousing in the transportation management, and then you can start basically your execution in your warehouse. That's what we delivered there. And I think now we have, at least from that point, a lot of functionalities covered. You will see later on that in the advanced shipping and receiving, we still have quite a bunch of things to do even in the future. So that will be a topic which will come on each and every slide, I think, for the next 1.5 years or even more, so that we constantly go to that strategic direction and add more and more functionalities on detail here. Another personal important topic, I believe, because this is really a kind of unique selling point for SAP, because I don't know any other software vendor who can offer this tight integration between manufacturing or production and the warehousing piece of it. I mean, we even see it at the customer side. Sometimes it's like own kingdoms. You have your manufacturing department, your logistics department, and sometimes they don't even really talk to each other, right? And there's a huge potential for efficiency, right? If you don't have handover points, so if manufacturing always says like, yeah, just drop me everything I want. And on the other side, I would not like to utilize as much space, right? I would like to lower the spaces here on the production side because I need it more for machines and stuff like that. Yeah, then you need to start talking tighter to each other, right? You need to constantly exchange the information between production and logistics. And therefore, we introduced already some releases back, the so-called MES-driven staging. So that's an approach where the MES system can directly call off certain components from the EWM system. You can do partial stagings and so on and so forth. And a big topic in that manufacturing environment is the so-called work in progress. What is work in progress? It's a material in a certain state where you don't have a material number with it. And if you know EWM, you can only manage a material in your warehouse. You need a dedicated material number for this purpose. And we have a new material type with a flag EWM only. And via that, we basically prohibit that the stock postings will be transferred back to the ECC system. So via that, you have a capability to have even like a metal sheet where there's just a hole drilled through it, but it's not really a spare part or something because you will never sell it. So you never hand it out outside your organization, but you might have needs to store it for an intermediate period of time and so on. So it's really a great functionality, and I get the message from all the manufacturing companies which I talk to, this is really a game changer in that environment. Dynamic staging is, again, it's coming out of this industry 4.0 area. Everybody has like these production lines in mind, but we are moving apart from that production lines in a linear way. Most of the manufacturing companies are aiming for matrix production, modular production. So they have production islands, and via that, you need these dynamic staging capabilities. Then we have some innovation topics. New kid on the block is the so-called SAP Warehouse Robotics, available since May. It's an own product on the BTP, so we have the integration as standard in the 2022 release. For sure, you can even do an OSS node implementation so that you can already use it with EWM 9.5 on NetWeaver. Warehouse zones for advanced interleaving. It's a kind of core logistical functionality. We would like to save some travel distance in the warehouse by getting the next closest warehouse order. And this we do by persisting a travel distance network, and we create warehouse zones. So the intention was that we, within a really, really short time frame, with 100, 200, 300 milliseconds, so without notified by the picker, you should get the next warehouse order assigned without any interruption. We have our first machine learning case in EWM, which is the machine learning for slotting. So we would like to step apart from this cumbersome master data attribute maintenance towards a machine learning algorithm, so that based on the previous decisions, we can retrieve the slotting decisions and do good suggestions for the future. We have continuous improvements. Here we talk about two-step, so we called it wave enhancement. In reality, it's about the two-step picking. We have simulation capabilities. The biggest change here is that we changed from back in the days, you had a material and you assigned if it is two-step picking relevant or not. But that was not optimal. It really needs to be matching the stock situation and basically the request for the outbound delivery order. So if you would like to get a full carton, it makes no sense to bring it to an intermediate storage location, hand it back. So you can directly pick the full carton and ship this carton without having this two-step picking. In other cases, you need to distribute across multiple outbound delivery orders, and then it might make sense to take it to that intermediate storage location. So really a functionality where you can gain efficiency as well. Synchronous goods movements. I think this is a big step into simplification. When we talk about embedded EWM, we have the synchronous movements enabled first for the production order related postings, and now we can say we basically enabled it for all warehouse relevant postings. So it's a huge step into simplification. Last but not least, correct rounding residuals. For some companies, they say, I don't care. For others, it's a huge problem. When we talk about conversion, for example, between kilograms and pounds, you always have this rounding residuals. And this we have now solved, and you should not have any problems with that as well. There's even a downput on that. So that's just the highlights out of that. If we go to the next slide, just to mention it, we have divided our investment budget into these different areas like integration, production, industry specifics, continuous improvements, innovations, and usability. From the integration, we did some additional things via the unified package builder. So this is where we try to harmonize our packaging instruction, packaging specification, and the package builder out of TM, so that you can decide in the application which master data, which algorithm you would like to use. We have done some quality enhancements. We have this so-called custom defined packing and picking. This might be known as the VL10HU transaction back in the day. So where you get production orders and they are packed already to the needs of your customer. And you would not like to split it off or break it off. And that with the warehouse, with the outbound delivery order, you ship according to the needs of your customer. We enabled the SCM route in embedded EWM again. So via that, you can even do the cross-docking again. For production, I stressed it already quite a bit. We delivered segmentation capabilities, you see on the industry specific side, and we even do it for production order. It's separately here because that came with the feature pack 1. We have, even in the manufacturing environment here, we talk more like process industry, where you have dedicated connected production or process orders. So you know already that the first part of the production step should directly go into the next one. And here you can define a kind of follow-up next PSA so that you don't need to store the product, so you can directly forward them. Industry-specific segmentation, this is mainly driven by our customer, by our fashion customers and so on, where they might need to separate stock into online business, e-commerce business, so that each and every segment gets his own stock. You can even think about country of origin constraints, which you can solve via that functionality. We had some automotive specifics like JIT calls in inbound, GTL scan, reference to summarize JIT calls in the outbound area. Field logistics for cross-docking is quite a specific one. It's more like for the oil and gas companies where they have these big oil platforms and you have your harbor base warehouse. So if you have maintenance orders, so that you order already to these maintenance orders, and there's a kind of holding indicator which says like, okay, it should stay at the harbor because you have very limited space at the oil platform, or you directly forward onto the oil platform. Continuous improvements. We have done enhancements still in the RF framework with screen personas. We have a very easy, I would call it low-code, no-code editor, where you can now tailor your screens to a certain extent. We have, for that purpose, even introduced the design mode and did some sound support on the pick card transaction. We have some miscellaneous topics like more migration objects when it comes to the data migration cockpit, print delivery note, simple deletion of deliveries, define custom fields. So if you're interested in the details, I would recommend to go to the blog post and check out the what's new documents here. Enhancement of public APIs, I think even that will stand there in each and every release. I mean, it's all about open up your software solution to extensions, add-ons. I think this will pay off for the config team maybe in the future as well, so that you can even consume these public APIs so that they are easier to consume here. Usability, we have a new Fiori application, managed physical stock. Sounds stupid, but in the back end, we really did improvements on the CDS views, and the stock read is much quicker via this transaction. And the idea is on the long run to replace the ad hoc movements via this managed physical stock transaction. We have round-offs and enhancements for the process warehouse task and packing Fiori application. We enabled mass GTS checks. We have some monitor enhancements, and there's an enterprise search capability for storage bins and warehouse products. I always call it like the Google search on SAP, so that you have a field, you just type in a number and it retrieves all the possible objects, and you need to enable this object. And here we basically moved into that house with the storage bin and warehouse product. Okay, let's go to the roadmap. Yeah, still we have quite a comprehensive roadmap in front of us. So we do smaller round-offs related to a customer connect session, which we offered last year. So we are now in the implementation phase of this customer connect. One point is basically the PMR order-based quantity calculation, for example, which we will deliver, and those things usually delivered via the OSS nodes. I think something I would like to highlight here is the second topic on the lower part here, which is the SAP EWM standalone on S/4HANA public cloud. So you know that we have our private cloud edition / on-premise, and we have our public cloud offering. For the public cloud offering, we only had the embedded WM capabilities. And we are aiming by 2023, or the cloud release would be then 2308, that we have a standalone public cloud offering for warehousing, so that you can have your ECC on-prem and you connect, for example, towards a public cloud warehouse management. It is more foreseen for the level 1, level 2, what Gartner sees as the target market here. So low complex, you have limited capabilities when it comes to tailoring the solution, to extend the solution. Therefore, the APIs are getting more and more important, so that you even can extend this solution to a certain extent. I always call the 2023 on-premise release a little bit under the tag decentral, because you see here we aim for enabling the advanced shipping and receiving capabilities for decentral deployment. When it comes to manufacturing, same story. Some customers challenged us and said like, yeah, standalone is still strategic for you, but reality shows that you have some gaps here, and bigger gaps would be in the area of manufacturing, so that we enable repetitive manufacturing and Kanban for the decentral deployment option as well. The warehouse robotic story will continue. I think there's a high demand on the market with shortage of labor, so that you really need to think of, okay, how can robots support you, relieve us from easy tasks like full pallet replenishment, so that we can utilize the remaining workforce for picking processes and stuff like that. Batch specific unit of measure is kind of feature priority topic, and we hope to close this with the 2023 release. And then more on the long run, beyond 2023, we see for sure many different scenarios for the ASR, like transit warehouse with ASR, for example. We have in mind a functionality which is called area and lane management, where you could more efficiently utilize the spaces behind the doors, where you have your staging and receiving lanes, so that you can assign them according, for example, to the final put away bin and stuff like that, so that you could even already from that point reduce the travel distance when the truck arrives, or even when you consolidate to staging areas, so that you have the shortest ways possible here. Product compliance is basically the successor of EH&S, where we would like to invest more. Warehouse robotics and automation, I think, is a continuous topic which will last for a longer time. Waveless picking or order streaming, you can call it, a functionality heavily requested by our e-commerce retail customers, where they say like, all the time when you build waves, you basically give a part a certain amount of time because you start to consolidate, you package your workload. And if you have a constant flow, a picking flow via this order streaming and waveless picking, you can get faster here. So we will look into that as well. The personal wish would be that we can focus maybe for one feature pack onto quality, performance, and simplification. So we get the message from the partners, from the customers, that they say like, it's such a good product. Yeah, we have a really good best of breed solution. So we are not lacking functionality, but it's sometimes hard if certain functionalities are not to the full extent in all the different scenarios are covered. So please do the round-offs so that the serial numbers are covered everywhere. Batch things or whatever you can imagine is covered everywhere, right? Don't ship new functionalities. We like it, yeah, for an innovation point of view, but it's even good to get faster, that we don't need to make our head on details on processes so that everything is supported everywhere. So let's see to which extent we can strengthen this capability. Then even far in the future or longer into the future, we think about early shipments. So this is about you have open inspection lots and would like to ship to other sites because your production site has very limited space. You need to go to an auto location. QS department is only working during daytime. You ship during night towards the auto location and then they release it or even block it, and it should correspondingly be blocked or released at the remote location. And then what we got from the last customer network meeting, so we had a big meeting with big customers, long roadmaps with EWM in front of them, and they were all in favor of having like a kind of, I always call it digital twin of the warehouse, so a 3D warehouse model, and you can think about multiple scenarios of that, so that you can say, I use it for configuration purpose, so I can draw a rack or whatever, and the bins are created accordingly. I can draw a rectangle and say like, this is one warehouse zone, should be represented. So it would make the configuration much easier. You can have analytics capabilities so that you color like the different areas, ABC classification, whatever you think of, right? And even to then, I think the final stage would be then the ultimate goal that you can even say, okay, I create a twin of that and do a simulation of that. What happens if I change the warehouse zones, right? To simulate, okay, the travel, we will get a rush hour in AIL4 or whatever, right? Because we changed the ABC classification or something like that. But for sure, this is a kind of vision here, but I think a very valid one. And we are really digging into it. We try to finding the technical baseline, and I mean the use cases are there. So this is really on the long run, but I think a good vision. So hopefully I don't consume too much of a time, but it's a lot of topics. It's a comprehensive product, and thanks to having me there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Florian. It was an absolutely fantastic insight into the latest release, but also the future, which I think hopefully everyone in the audience is really excited to see as things come out from yourself and your team. So I'm going to hand over now to Stephen, who's going to take us through optimizing SAP EWM. Over to you, Stephen.
Cool, thanks very much, Jeff. And hello, everyone. Just bear with me. It's kind of in the latter part of the evening for me, or for anyone who's kind of on the other side of the world from Europe. But thanks very much, Jeff and Florian especially. It's great hearing all the excellent investments and new innovations that are coming out in the latest release, and also in some of those future releases. I think the advanced shipping and receiving for Decentral is something that I think is going to be extremely welcomed. But obviously, without a good mobile UI, then a lot of these things are still difficult to consume for end users. And so certainly at the config team, we've been not quiet, and we've been working quite heavily on our pre-built for EWM solution to continue improving the user interface for operators on a day-to-day basis. One of the I guess the good things to call out is that the pre-built for EWM solution that we build naturally incorporates all these types of new roadmap items that are coming out from SAP. And one of the reasons for this is that it's not a separate solution, standalone solution that's kind of built in a black box. It sits on top of the standard SAP core and utilizes all of standard SAP functionality. So it basically gives us that ability that as new features are introduced, especially around the RF side of things with new features, it means we can immediately jump into those things. And something that immediately reaches out there are things like advanced interleaving. So advanced interleaving is going to have an impact on the flow of an operator. And if you run a standalone mobile UI, that is built on your own logic, you won't have access to that kind of information easily. So pre-built for EWM will naturally absorb that kind of information and use that to again improve general execution for an operator inside the warehouse on the shop floor. Another, obviously, just a bit of background, I guess, refreshers for people who aren't too familiar with pre-built for EWM. Pre-built for EWM is our mobile EWM solution. It's purpose-built for SAP EWM's RFUI and the underlying framework. So the key thing to keep in mind there is it's not just a front-end tool that is making the screen look pretty. It's a tool that's integrated all the way back into RFUI, step flow logic, menu structures, resource management. So it's when you actually use it, you see much more how it actually can improve the day-to-day usability of a warehousing system. Now, one of the key things really to call out from that perspective, and this is really, I guess, our vision, our objective for mobility on the shop floor, is that the EWM solution itself has just a fantastic RFUI and framework that underlines all of mobility on the shop floor. From a kind of a usability perspective, though, our goal, and this has been something which has been called out quite heavily by Gartner over the last, really the last year or two, has been around that consumer grade mobile solution. And really, mobile mobility has to be something that is so simple to use. Gone are the days where customers are kind of happy and expecting multiple days of training, and that operators, potentially will take, 1 week, 1 month, 6 months to get up to a certain level of productivity. It needs to be as simple as using your normal personal phone, logging, when you use your emails, look in Safari, etc. These are meant to be simple things that you don't need training for. And our view is that should be the same thing with operations on the shop floor as well. So obviously we don't want to replace RFUI and how that works in EWM, and we don't replace it. But what we do is we enable a bunch of additional features on top of that that really allow us to re-envision how mobility should work for SAP EWM, and that's what we do with pre-built for EWM. Obviously, the solution itself still works on, it's backward compatible, obviously, for our SAP Business Suite customers, so those running ECC, EWM 9.x or 7.x solutions. But obviously, moving forward, we certainly support all S4HANA versions, and there are a number of things in S4HANA, especially around analytics, that we openly support. So it was great to hear Florian just mentioning about some of the CDS improvements around inventory. As we all know, anyone who's been that technical knows how difficult that's been in the past. So again, those types of CDSs are things that we can consume within pre-built for EWM as part of our analytics solution as well. So some of the things we've been working on from a mobile perspective with pre-built for EWM 4.9. So 4.9 is our latest version. We released this only a few months ago. And this has really given us a first time to showcase some of these features. We focused in a number of different areas. Primarily, it has been just typically around usability. So this is focusing on, again, that vision of consumer grade usability, but also we have a number of features in there that incorporate requirements and requests from customers that we've had over the years. And for those of you on the call who have implemented EWM in the past, for those consultants, some of these things I think will also ring true for you as well. We've made a few improvements around gamification. We've also included, and are really proud to say, we've now incorporated the Scandit engine directly into pre-built for EWM. So this allows us to essentially implement solutions such as basically implement an augmented reality scanning solution. Now at the moment it only supports serialization capture, but this is directly integrated within pre-built and is out of the box in our solution. This is not a conference room pilot or just a proof of concept that we use to wow customers. It's what we have normally. And then finally, we've spent a lot of time working on voice integration and basically making the speed to go live for a voice solution a lot faster, and really putting control back into the functional consultant rather than it being a massive technical project. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I'll very quickly, and this is obviously always the dangerous point of any kind of presentation, is I'll very quickly jump into a small presentation on pre-built for EWM. I'll quickly just log in here, and I'm just going to show you a couple of these new features that we have. I need to log in quickly with a password.
Just as Stephen's logging in here, Stephen's obviously shown the different devices that we support, so the solution is completely device agnostic as well, and can run on various different types of screen sizes that automatically renders to that device size. So you're not having to build templates for each device type.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And obviously you're just seeing this on my desktop, so I am using my mouse. I haven't got a touch screen here. And this is essentially emulating a system that would have function keys, which I guess, again, is a little bit wrong for this emulator because I don't have any function keys as a touch screen. So from that perspective, I would normally switch those off so I don't need to have them. So a lot of you who've used EWM will be aware of this screen. I'm just logging into RFUI with my resource and I can navigate forward. You can see my normal menu structure here. Now, one of the first features that we brought in that has been a complaint for many years has been around receiving by HU. So in the past, there's been a number of different ways you can start your receiving process, and that's through identifying the delivery you're receiving based on an ASN or a purchase order number or a delivery reference or a door assignment. Lots of different ways of doing it. One of the things, and again, people may have seen this before, that we wanted to do was really bring this into a single search function. Now, one of the things we've done here, and this is where the overall platform that we've built for pre-built FreeWM really shines, is similar to what you might see in the Fiori Launchpad. We basically have what's called a unified search. So based on the number that I enter, the system will look for matching pairs of that and then allow me to see straight away. So this is very useful, for instance, if you haven't got a barcode to scan and you need to type a number. So you can just type in the number that you have and the system will immediately start to suggest inbound deliveries that are due for receipt around the time in which you are actually receiving. So obviously we've got this in a demo system quite spread out quite wide, so I can look back quite a few months, but you can also lock this down to only a number of days forward and in the past. So in here, I can basically go through, find the delivery I'm after, select that delivery, and then you'll notice this screen. This is the standard screen you'd use for identifying a new pallet that you're receiving. Again, you can just start scanning pallets if it's been pre-packed. In this case, I'm going to say, actually, I've got a new HU that I'm going to receive, so a new product that I'm going to receive on here. And this brings us to our next feature. So again, obviously for a lot of customers, blind receiving, so basically going to the product, scanning a barcode is useful. But in some cases, maybe you don't have the barcode. It's it's one of these particular smaller vendors that you've purchased from where they don't quite adhere to the standards that you need for encoding stock that arrives. So you want to get a view of what products are available. So then the system will basically look at all expected products of the inbound delivery and will show you basically each of those products along with a quick summary of what was the original quantity, how much is open still for receiving, and how much is remaining to be packed. So again, I can select the product that I want to receive. And again, that then fills in here. So you can see previous features where I can basically get a picture of the product. I can also replace that picture by taking using my phone to take a new picture of it. So this is quite useful for replacing these more complex QB-scan solutions where you take a photo in that way. Now, one of the other features to call out here is typically when I'm packing here, operators are usually at this point required to know what the conversion is. So how many eaches are in a case or how many cases are in a pallet. In many cases, this is something the operator doesn't know. And so for them, what we can do now is actually say, well, I want to look at what other options are available. I'll change the unit of measure that I'm receiving in. So they can actually click on this and that immediately, whoops, sorry, I was a bit quick there. That brings up all the units of measure. Now, this is a configurable section of pre-built FreeWM. So you can identify what units of measure are relevant for you in the warehouse. And then for each of those, we basically take the quantity to receive and show you the different conversions for that. So as an operator, you can choose that. Now, again, one of the other things you'll notice with pre-built FreeWM, and this is where it really differs from personas and from UI5 generators, is you'll notice that this window is just appearing above the standard execution window. So I'm not having to navigate to a different screen. These are all features that really improve the immersive nature of pre-built FreeWM. Now, one of the other things that we've done in version 4.9 is our gamification is accessible everywhere now. So I can just choose up here our gamification button, and you'll see here immediately all the games I currently have and also the log. Let's have a look at active games. So right now I have an active competition, picker of the week. We're in week 11, and you can see the date was obviously set wrong because it's got 95 days to go, which is a little bit wrong. But essentially in here, you can see the people who are currently running in the game. Additionally, we also have challenges running at the same time. So at the moment, the challenge we have is a pick progressor, and you can see I've only just started it. So this would be very typical if I was on the first day of the job. So I haven't actually achieved my first level, which is doing one pick, and you can see that there's quite a few levels to progress to. And not to spend too much time on gamification, but obviously the purpose of challenges obviously is very much about the individual, and the purpose of competitions is either individual against individual or team against team. And it's really a balance of what works for your operation, for your environment. Sometimes competitions are not very good if you're concerned about potentially the negative impacts of a competition, if someone loses or safety issues, etc. But again, if that is a concern, then you can either make it team on team, or you can look at challenges which are much more about the individual, and it's not noticeable except to the individual and their manager themselves. So that's really just a very brief view of some of the new features that we've got in pre-built for EWM. We've got separate sessions and more details on our website and LinkedIn posts that go into a lot more detail actually about it. So what I'll do, I'll jump back to the presentation now. And one of the other areas I mentioned before that we've looked at, that we've introduced into version 4.9, is we've integrated the standard advanced scanning engine within pre-built for EWM. So one of the things, and unfortunately, I need to actually have a proper handheld device for this to work. My emulator here doesn't do it. But essentially, when you go to, when you have a product that is serialized or serial number managed, and during receiving, you need to capture those serial numbers, then the moment you've actually entered in your quantity, the system can either automatically direct you, or you can manually trigger the camera to be activated. And what the system will do is automatically start to scan the barcodes that you can see. So you can see here, these are a number of different examples we've captured from one of our sites down in Hobart in Tasmania, Australia. And this particular example here, the system will essentially scan for the barcodes, and then as it finds applicable barcodes, and we can control those rules, it will scan it and send that back to SAP EWM. Every successfully accepted barcode will then appear green, and then unsuccessful barcodes and barcodes you haven't scanned yet will appear in red. So this is quite useful because as you're walking around a pallet with a lot of different barcodes, you can very easily see which barcodes you've scanned and which ones you have yet to scan. So this is really a powerful thing, and this is working in real time. So unfortunately, I haven't got a live demo here. We can do that. We'll do that separately. But as you're scanning these barcodes, you can actually see in the screen behind the barcodes being validated by EWM in the back end. And this is, again, one of the real advantages of how pre-built for EWM both utilizes the RF framework, but also enhances a lot further above that with direct web service calls as well. Finally, one thing I'd just like to call out is the work we've been doing on voice integration. And again, it's not something which is easiest to demonstrate in a session today, but essentially we've been working. One of the problems we've always found with implementing voice with customers, and there's a number of different options for voice integration in the marketplace, but typically in the past it's always been a developer intensive procedure to do it. So whilst we do have functional consultants who would work with customers and understand the expected voice flows that are required, and those voice flows always work somehow into either the standard pick by voice logical transaction in EWM, or we build new logical transactions, the end result is always a developer needing to do quite a lot of extensive work to properly set up the grammars, properly set up the infrastructure to make this work. And one of the things we really wanted to focus on was to make that a much simpler job, where the deployment of the technical aspect of the solution is measured in a matter of days. And in fact, we can typically do that in about 1 day. And then the actual configuration, which is very similar to just setting up a new screen, and it sits within the pre-built for voice configuration framework, is something that the functional consultant can do immediately following on from voice workshops. So it reduces the length of time it actually takes us to go to market. It reduces obviously the cost of implementation for the customer as well. But the other advantage as well is, like pre-built for EWM, this is not something that we do that you're then tied into the config team for forever. The configuration and setup is something that we train the customer to own and to control, and our partners as well. And the same with voice. We could go in there, help set up a pre-built for voice picking solution. But the customer could then 6 months down the track decide that they want to also voice enable a physical inventory path as well, and they could do that themselves. They wouldn't need to have us back to do that. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Absolutely brilliant. A great overview there of the latest capabilities and also future direction in terms of what we're doing with pre-built. So just in summary, again, thank you, Stephen, for that overview there, and thank you very much, Florian, for that great insight into EWM. I think, obviously the config team were heavily invested in all SAP supply chain technologies, and EWM being right at the forefront of what we do. So we're really excited to have this webinar today with Florian, and at that point I'd just like to say thank you guys for co-hosting this with me, and I'd like to open up the call for any questions.
Thanks everyone. So we have had a few questions that have come in as you guys have been presenting. So one that I think came in while Florian was talking was asking if cartonization has improved PSHU creation.
Actually, we have not done any changes on that one. No.
Okay, perfect. And then we've also had somebody asking about what they need to consider when deciding the best deployment option for SAP EWM. So I don't know if that's something that Leanne can look at.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emma. I think Florian, feel free to jump in as well. For me, when considering the best deployment option, I think we obviously need to look at the individual companies, the operational processes, the complexity around that, requirements for any standalone capability, automation integration. And I think production integration is also one of the heavy drivers on what deployment option will be best. I know a lot of the things that Florian was talking about was the actual close production integration that's been worked on heavily over the last few years, which has been really, really good, and the functionality that's offered, a lot of simplification around that. So I think they're the main things. It's all driven around the operational complexity, in my opinion, is what we're seeing at customers. But Florian, I'm not sure if you've got anything further to add to that.
Yeah, you just mentioned, I think it's I think one of the most common questions we basically receive all the time. There's no golden rule for that, really. It depends on really your setup. In terms of simplification, I think there's a big step forward when we talk about embedded. There's contradictory requirements when it comes to automation. I think is a heavy driver, for example, despite from the manufacturing area for going decentral, for example. I think what I receive as questions, and maybe with that new option, what I showed for the public cloud WM offering as well, that we are going more and more into kind of hybrid scenarios. It will not be the one and only solution. If we talk about our big customers, then it's usual that they have big distribution centers where you have to have the need to tailor your solution. You squeeze out the last millisecond of each and every packing step because you need to be as efficient as possible here. And that is most of the time a driver going to private cloud edition, so a kind of standalone deployment. On the other hand, you have like smaller warehouses. Production supply most of the time has these small warehouses that you say, I just store a couple of components, simple racking, maybe even no automation and so on. That is then basically an embedded, or you think about remote locations, right? If you have your IT department somewhere, either in Europe or in Australia, still there, and then you have maybe in Asia some manufacturing sites or whatever with a small warehouse. You don't have IT department. You would like to reduce the total cost of ownership, and that could be the link then towards, let's say, this public cloud WM offering, which we are aiming for in the future. So it will not be this is the one and only solution. I think we are more and more figuring out that we have a hybrid setup.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, a lot of the roadmap and that we're doing for customers at the minute, we are finding that we're going more on hybrid route as a, the option is decentral. Everybody has to go decentral. It's case by case by customer, but also warehouse by warehouse that we need to look at with it and do the in-depth analysis into that to see what best solution will fit what specific warehouse, I guess, as well.
It's actually, maybe just to add as well, there was just prior to the actual webinar starting, there was an interesting conversation that I was having with Florian, and that was regarding and maybe a lot of people have seen out there's a Gartner white paper that was produced last year, which spoke about the different levels of warehouses, level 1 up to level 5 and EWM sweet spot. And I think, as you were mentioning, that public cloud really is an interesting push into that level 1 kind of offering. I think it's not quite there yet, but it's certainly another thing to consider as well.
Yeah. Great, perfect. On the pre-built side, someone's asked if we run compatibility tests for pre-built after Android and iOS releases.
Yeah, so just a first thing to say on that, Gemma, is that the market and what we see is predominantly Android within the industrial space. So most of the devices and most of the implementations we do with pre-built are for Android. We do sometimes see iOS, but it's not as prevalent at the moment. In terms of pre-built, we release independently, so we'll test our solution and regression test that against Android plus iOS devices, and we have minimum versions that we support of those from the, I can't remember, what is it, off the top of my head, Android 8 and above, basically is what we support. So it's very much as Android and iOS versions, we regression test against them.
Okay. And as you were talking about the multiple barcode handling, Stephen, there's a question coming about if in a delivery there's 10 SKUs, can they scan all 10 SKUs at the same time?
So can you read the question again? 10?
Yeah, so 10 SKUs, if they have, can they scan all 10 at the same time?
So there's actual 10 products. Not at the moment, because ultimately what we're doing is we're just working on the standard solution. So in terms of the standard RFUI framework, so basically in receiving, you need to identify your product, the quantity, pack, move on to the next product, the quantity, pack, and so on. So the idea of scanning 10 SKUs kind of doesn't fit within that. I mean, but at the same time, if you had a specific use case in where you actually wanted to do that, then then you could essentially customize essentially build a new back-end screen, and then that would allow the standard engine to immediately capture those 10 SKUs and pass them to the back end. The thing is, obviously, why we've got it working for serialization is because the standard serialization capture screen is all about receiving multiple serial numbers, one after another. So if you're looking to capture 10 product numbers, so SKUs, then obviously you need to have that logical transaction, that step, that is designed to capture one product after another. But if your question is relating specifically to, let's say it was a QR code or a composite barcode, where you wanted to be able to capture 5 or 6 or 10 of them in one go, and each of those by themselves has all the information required, that is a really, really interesting scenario to talk about. Again, the standard RFUI screen received by HU is you get the first product, and you usually have to go through 3 steps in order to fulfill that receipt before you start with the next product. But it wouldn't be a particularly logical long step to do that and allow that kind of just mass receipts of multiple QR codes. But obviously, if you do that, you're needing to automate a couple of other steps within the framework. But those steps can be automated. So yeah, it's an interesting question, not out of the box, but certainly not the hardest thing in the world to do either, if that answers the question.
Perfect, thank you. And then there's also been a question about different languages. So how does pre-built work with different languages within the same company?
Yeah. So, do you want to handle that, Jeff? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll jump in. We use the standard language packs within SAP, so it's fully supported. And then what we actually do as part of the implementation with pre-built, we have BC sets in essence to provide a base build of what the standard screens should look like. And some of those is where we've added descriptions and things like that that are missing within RFUI. So anything like that would need to be translated into another language, but it's fully supported and uses the SAP standards.
Yeah, it's the standard SAP translation toolkit that we're using here. So all our tables where there's descriptions, etc., maintained are all keyed on language as well. So yeah, so if you're already running an EWM solution with RFUI, and you're already running that in Spanish or Japanese or whatever language, that would naturally work within pre-built for EWM as well.
Okay, perfect. And then there's a question around whether it's possible to integrate mobile phone cameras for scanning barcodes.
Yes, absolutely, and that's actually standard, and that's one of the reasons why. So some customers will ask us when they're using pre-built for EWM. So there's an APK. So if we're talking Android, there's an APK that's installed on your device. That would typically be managed by an MDM. So that runs the actual pre-built app, which is a very thin app that talks to your SAP backend. That natively will use the camera on your mobile phone. That standard engine that you saw is basically connected into that camera. So basically it's part of the pre-built app, and essentially it's taking the images that your camera on your phone, that is your phone's camera is taking. It's essentially interpreting those images and adding a lot more smarts onto those images that your phone wouldn't usually do. If customers choose to go with actually using the web browser on their phone instead, that's where it gets a little bit trickier, because now what you're trying to do is let your web browser have access to your camera, and that is not a pre-built restriction, so to speak. That is actually then a phone security restriction, which you need to manage kind of separately. But normally, yes, pre-built for EWM uses the camera on your phone. Obviously, if you purchase more of a specific ruggedized device by one of the the well-known manufacturers, they have integrated cameras, integrated barcode scanners as well. And again, we work natively with those. But that's actually a very good question, a good question, because it really pushes back into that other view as well, which is, you don't need to run all warehouses with expensive, ruggedized specific mobile devices. If you're a smaller warehouse where having a handheld Android device that maybe only cost you $500, then this is perfect. Stick it in an OtterBox case and you're off and running. That's kind of the beauty of this type of a solution. If you don't need a long-range scanner, then yeah, you don't need to go down that path.
Perfect, thanks. Florian, as well, someone's asked about whether you can use WM S4 Cloud as decentralized with an on-prem S4 ERP system.
You're talking about the public cloud offering I have mentioned, or the standard on-premise private cloud edition? I mean, for the public cloud WM, as mentioned, we are just aiming for 2308 when we deliver that. So it's under disclaimer, it's what we are aiming for. When we talk about the on-prem solution, if we talk about the communication of EWM on-premise towards the public cloud, we can do that already with the SCM base. So with the EWM 9.5, we can communicate to the S4. Let's say with the public cloud towards an S4 decentralized solution, we are aiming for 2402 release in the future. As there are some limitations which we can't influence, which is about the batch replication, which is currently not yet there. So as soon as this is there and they aim for 2308 with the next one, we try to release it officially with the 2402, but under disclaimer, subject to be changed. But this is at least our plan.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then also there's been a couple of things around any challenges on moving from EWM on Business Suite to S4HANA.
Okay, in terms of challenges, I think, Florian, again, feel free to jump in, but from my point of view, it's, treating it as it's not just a simple upgrade, is one thing to keep in mind. The challenges, obviously, I think, as with everything, comes around custom code. So, the custom code that needs to be moved, there needs to be a lot of analysis around that. There are a lot of functionality differences now, as the new releases come. New functionalities brought in. There is a lot more capabilities with S4 EWM offering as opposed to the Business Suite. So it's getting the transformation right into an S4 environment and taking all your custom code into consideration, seeing whether it's a greenfield, it's a re-implementation. I think another point just to mention is the transactional data as well. You can't move that over, unfortunately. So closing of documents and things like that need to be done. I think they're the main key ones that I can think of right now, Florian. I'm not sure if you've got anything to add to those.
Yeah, let me add a couple of things to that. First of all, I always get the question about what's the driver to go to S4, right? Why should we do that migration? And I mean, if we talk about the SCM platform with 9.5, right, then we talk basically about a product which is roughly 8 years old, right? So you lack the innovations of the last 8 years. And if you see that only with the 2022 release, we created like 150 pages of new stuff, right? You can multiply that up by 8 times, right? Or even more. So it's a massive amount of new features, functionalities, simplifications, integration capabilities. I mean, I have quite a bunch of functionalities. I mean, the synchronous postings are just one example, which is a huge step forward in simplification. For example, the new Fiori dialogues. I think the packaging screen, which we have created, is really a good one. We did it in co-innovation cycles with our big customers, and I think this is really a good fit for many customers. I don't say that we covered all. I mean, that is almost impossible, I think, by that variety of customers you have, but we have a lot of innovations. That's the first statement. And secondly, you already mentioned two interesting topics, and we have some offerings from our Center of Excellence, so our COE colleagues, when it comes to custom code. So they have a custom code analysis. So I would recommend really to take this service from our COE colleagues. So they do an analysis and basically recommend changes or say where there might be difficulties to take over your custom code. And the second topic you mentioned about the transactional data migration, they even have a service for transactional data migration available. They have successfully done that for multiple customers, for really big ones now. So it's working. And even if you have this limitation that you cannot close it, so yet that you have to take over transactional data, I would highly recommend to get in contact with our COE colleagues to tackle that one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I think that is where at the end now, and I think that's the all of the questions answered there. So thank you for everyone. I'll over to Jeff to say thank you.
Thanks, Gemma. And no, just a massive thank you for everyone attending the webinar today. Thank you, Florian, for joining us. Thanks, Stephen, for presenting. Thanks, Leanne, for all your expertise input on the questions. And you know, I think, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, this will be available for anybody who couldn't attend. So this has been recorded. But I hope everyone has a great day. And any further questions, please follow up with anybody on the on the session. We're happy to help and provide any information that's required for you. So thank you. Hope everyone has a good day, and we'll close the call there.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.